For some reason, I was constantly unlucky with women, because almost every one of them tried to deceive me somehow, and it really upset me. But then something changed, and I realized that I had to take revenge. Because sooner or later, you will definitely get lucky.
As I glanced around the room, a smile crept onto my face. Jerry truly deserved this happiness after the tough few years he'd had. Honestly, I was surprised to even be here. I had called him when I received the invitation. "Are you sure about this?" He laughed in response. "Absolutely. If it wasn't for you, I'd have never met Anna. I owe you. If you hadn't been the person you are, I might be dead or in jail by now. You stuck by me when most people would have just walked away. So I went to his wedding. I even got a seat at the main table, though I wasn't part of the ceremony. When I met his new wife, she hugged me and whispered in my ear, 'He's told me everything about your past, but I'd love to hear your side of the story. It's like nothing I've ever heard.' I smiled, watching them together. He was 42, she was 46, but they acted like teenagers in love. I genuinely wished them the best. While dancing with the bride, I saw her. My body froze. Anna looked up at me, confused, and followed my gaze. I tried to pull away, but her grip tightened. "Calm down. Please don't ruin my wedding." I took a deep breath, trying to regain control. "What the hell? What's she doing here? Does Jerry know? If not, this is going to ruin everything." "He knows. He invited her. He said he did it for you. Now calm down and finish this dance." So, we finished. I was seriously considering just walking out, but Jerry was already waiting for me at the table. I stormed over to him, getting right in his face. "I can't believe you'd invite your ex-wife to your wedding. What were you thinking?" He shook his head, smiling faintly. "I didn't invite her to the wedding, just the reception, and I did it for you. At some point tonight, you need to sit down and talk to her just for a few minutes." "This isn't for me," he continued. "Do it for yourself, and for her. Neither of you will ever move on if you don't. But let me tell you something. She really does love you." I sat there, stewing in frustration. Jerry and Anna took turns sitting with me, making sure I didn't leave. I know I must have annoyed them with my complaints, until Anna finally lost her patience. "For a guy who's been to war, you're being a real coward when it comes to her. Just talk to her, get it over with, and leave if you want. You're dragging everyone down, and I don't want my wedding memories to include babysitting a whiny guy pretending to be a tough man." I was more shocked by her using the words "bitch" than anything else. But then I realized she was right. Besides, she had given me 4 really strong drinks in quick succession. At that moment, she appeared beside me, tears in her eyes, hand outstretched. "Dance with me, please?" I could have been a jerk and yelled at her. I could have stayed seated and ignored her. I could have gotten up and walked away. Instead, I took her hand. We moved onto the dance floor, her painfully familiar body pressed against mine as we slowly swayed to the song the band was playing. I felt her tremble slightly and looked down to see her tears falling onto my jacket. I started to pull away, wanting to say something. She raised a hand to my lips. "Please, don't talk. Just hold me and let me pretend, just for a moment, that you still love me." And that was the core of my problem. I still did love her. So we continued to move slowly across the dance floor, each lost in our own memories and thoughts. I replayed all the women I thought I loved, including her, wondering why she had to be the one I wanted, the one I planned to spend my life with, only to find out she was never truly mine. That's why it hurt so much. I held her and let the memories wash over me. I could see it coming. I just didn't believe it. The guy was around 5'7" or 8", weighing less than 150. He must have been close to 40, I was 31, 6'2", and about 210, mostly muscle. He charged at me, with two of his friends, trying to hold him back. I was in a good mood. It was a Thursday, I'd just gotten paid, and my girl was meeting me for drinks and dinner, followed by dessert back at home. I'd already had a couple of beers while hanging out with my buddies. I didn't know the guy, never seen him in my life. He stopped right in front of me, and I was wondering what he was after when I noticed his arm moving. It swung up from somewhere near his knees, gaining speed as it came. I saw his hand clench into a fist, moving so slowly it was obvious he'd probably never thrown one before. I remember thinking whatever he hit better be soft, or he was going to hurt himself. Then he connected with my eye. I was so intrigued by watching it unfold that I didn't even think to defend myself. Down I went, and he started trying to kick me. I'd been out of action long enough to let my guard down, but not so long that my instincts and training didn't take over. I rolled and swept his legs out from under him, bringing him to the ground beside me, quickly putting him in a hold. I may have landed a couple of kidney shots, too, judging by the look of pain on his face. Two of his friends tried to intervene, but there were fewer of them than people, and they asked the bartender for help to pull me away from him. My cousin, who was both a bartender and the owner of the place, saw the cheap booze and just kept wiping the glass he was holding in his hand. As soon as I caught my breath, I pounced on the guy. "What the hell is wrong with you? Do you want to die attacking strangers half your age and twice your size? I should have punished you and sent you home to your wife all bruised and bruised." He continued to resist. "Let me go, you bastard. You need to learn a lesson about not messing with married women." I looked at him, wondering if he was under something or just out of his mind. Pushing him away, I stood up. "Buddy, I don't meddle in what is forbidden, but if you attack me again, I promise you'll get a good beating. Understood?" It didn't seem like he got the message, because he came back up, yelling and swinging. I threw a jab with my left hand and followed it with a right hook to his jaw. He went down hard and stayed down. Then I turned to his friends. "Get him out of here, and I'm pretty sure management would agree he's not welcome here anymore. And let him know that attacking younger, stronger, and meaner strangers isn't the best way to make it to old age." They looked like they wanted to argue, but the bartender shut that down quickly. Eventually, they dragged him out, and we had a good laugh for a few minutes before my date arrived. She saw the start of my black eye and immediately switched into nurturing mode. "What happened, babe?" I played it off lightly. "Some guy barged in and accused me of having an affair with his wife. He threw a punch before I could even react. Honestly, it was a bit sad. The guy had to be in his 40s, small, and clearly didn't know how to fight. But credit to him for having the guts. If his wife is messing around with someone, that guy better be careful." I noticed her face had gone pale as I told the story, so I tried to comfort her. "Don't worry, babe. I'm totally fine. But if you feel the need to kiss it better, I won't stop you." She immediately covered my face with soft kisses before pulling back with a playful smile. "There you go. Did Mama make it all better? No way some mean old man should be hitting my honey. He must have been pretty tough to come after you. Didn't he see those nice muscles?" she teased, running her hand over my bicep. I later realized she was trying to get me to describe him again. Actually, he was an older guy, short, and had a bit of a gut. No skills, but a lot of nerve. If his wife's cheating, it's going to be bad news if he finds the guy. Melody went quiet again before excusing herself to the restroom, saying she wasn't feeling well. My cousin Bob, who was bartending, had overheard most of the conversation. It's always the quiet ones, you know? He was probably living his own version of the American dream, thinking life was perfect, then finds out his wife's been unfaithful. Those are the ones to watch out for, the ones who could snap in a rage. I've seen it 100 times, at least. Hope you knocked some sense into him so he'll leave you alone. I nodded in complete agreement. I hope he finds the guy and gives him what he deserves. I've seen a few men break down after getting Dear John letters while I was in the service. Still, he should make sure he's got the facts right and be cautious. He's not much of a fighter. Melody came back, looking upset. I'm sorry, sweetheart, the hospital called. There was a major accident on the interstate, and they're short-staffed. They really need me, so I have to go in. I'll call you tomorrow if I'm not too exhausted. Love you. She kissed my cheek and hurried out. This wasn't the first time it happened. She worked as a trauma nurse at the local hospital. Fortunately for me, her shifts were 12 hours long at the beginning of the week, so she was free from Thursday to Saturday. As for me, I was often working out of town. No, I don't have a high-paying executive job that has me flying all over the country, fixing issues for big corporations or saving the world for the government. I work with stone. Yes, stone. Big rocks. You get it? My dad was the one who did the jet setting, making loads of money for his company. He was hardly ever around, so my mom was the one who mostly raised my sister and me. And she did a great job, in my opinion. When I was 12, my dad decided he didn't need a middle-aged, middle-class wife anymore and replaced her with a younger woman. Mom was devastated, but my grandfather, who never liked my dad much, was furious. Dad tried to push through the divorce quickly and cut off financial support to pressure her. But Pops stepped in, spent his own money, and got her the second-best divorce lawyer in the state, only because the best one was unavailable, and completely crushed him in court. Dad fought hard until Pops threatened to sue his company for violating the morals clause, since Dad's new woman used to be his assistant. Fearing for his career, he caved in quickly, and although Mom was heartbroken, she came out of it all in a good position. Dad moved across the country, and we barely saw him again until he showed up at my high school graduation, offering to pay for my full tuition at a top West Coast college if I agreed to move. I politely declined, but when he pushed, I got loud and physically kicked him out of the house. Haven't seen him since. Mom remarried a good man who truly loved her. To everyone's surprise, she got pregnant, and I became a big brother at 15. I admired him, and my sister adored him. He offered to help with college, but didn't push when I chose not to pursue further education right away. Instead, I joined the military, serving 4 years with a year each in both major war zones. When I got out, I had a better understanding of how the world worked, so I used my military benefits to go to school part-time while working for my grandfather. As you might have guessed, he was a master stonemason. It was all he'd done his entire life. Even at 62, his physique was something most 30-year-old gym enthusiasts would envy. While my dad couldn't distance himself fast enough, I was hooked by the time I was old enough to lift a stone. Pops would leave a pile of stones in the backyard, rewarding me based on how quickly I could put them together. Sometimes I'd arrange them in ways he hadn't imagined, but by the time I was 13, they always held firm. At 14, I became his apprentice, working during summers and after school whenever he had jobs near home. In Afghanistan, especially in the area where I was stationed, there was no shortage of rocks, and I'd relax by building walls, especially around our positions. After a wall I built saved a few lives, including our captain's, the other guys became eager to help. We ended up with the best fortified positions around. The Afghans were exceptional stonemasons, and I studied their techniques, sometimes working alongside them to construct schools and hospitals. I learned as much as I could from them. When I got back, Pops brought me into the business. Before long, I was managing jobs for him, usually with just a helper or two. He typically handled the larger projects. One of the worst days of my life was when he passed away, a victim of a texting driver. He was hit head-on as he crossed the street. They estimated the driver was going 65 miles per hour at the time of the collision. My grandfather was driving his '66 Ford pickup, which had no airbags or headrests. He suffered a broken neck, and the doctors believe he probably died instantly. Regardless of how it happened, he was gone at 66. He was set to retire as soon as he finished his current job. He and Grandma had bought an RV, planning to travel across the country. Due to his impending retirement, he had gradually transferred the company to me, so I didn't have much paperwork to handle. I was 27 at the time. Stone masonry is a captivating field. A master mason can earn a substantial income depending on the work. My company specialized in building and restoring dry walls constructed without mortar, relying on the size and arrangement of the rocks to maintain their structure. It's a skill that's not easily acquired, and we were the best in the region. Before he passed, my grandfather had secured a contract with the state university system to repair walls on their 5 oldest campuses. Some of these walls were over 300 years old, either in disarray or completely fallen. I had a team consisting of 2 master masons and 3 to 4 apprentices at each site. The apprentices were there for training, and we paid them $15 to $20 an hour, depending on their skill level. As they advanced, their pay increased. Becoming a master mason took years, but as I mentioned, the compensation was excellent. There was a concern about whether I would maintain the contract, but I managed to persuade them to trust me. Look, Pops was mostly just handling administrative tasks before he passed. The same masons with the same level of skill are still working. I assure you, the quality of the work won't decline. In the end, they decided to keep us on, mainly because the company was under my name by then, and they had never had any complaints before. They also understood that finding replacements would be difficult since skilled stone masons are quite rare, and exceptional ones are even rarer. I disliked being a manager because it meant I didn't get to lay stone regularly. To address this, I hired my sister Becky. She was skilled at laying stone and had a keen eye for spotting poor workmanship. Having just graduated with a business degree and finding limited job opportunities, she took the role for the experience. We still had to hold meetings and review the books, which we planned to align with our weekly family dinners. My stepfather Jerry was an accountant, and Pops had handed over the business to him when he married Mom, due to his fondness for Jerry. Gram was always present, contributing her years of experience, and Mom participated in discussions as well. My younger brother Jerry Jr. was 15, and I had promised him a job for the next summer. He would start at the bottom, working hard like any apprentice. Though he had a great aptitude for numbers and likely wouldn't pursue masonry, accountants are valuable too. I was 30 years old when I first met Melody. One Thursday night, she came to a bar with friends, and it was an instant connection, almost like passion at first sight for both of us. My cousin Billy owned the place and had live bands every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. It was a blue-collar bar, mostly featuring country music, and some of the bands were pretty good. I watched Mel dance to a few upbeat songs, admiring her grace. When the band started a slow song, Mel approached the bar and ordered drinks for her table. As the music played, she reached out and took my hand. I hate to waste a good slow song, and yes, I'd love to dance with you. Thanks for asking. I was so taken aback that I couldn't find my words and ended up stumbling along behind her while my friends laughed. Slow dancing with Mel felt like it should be a rite of passage for graduating seniors, just to show how it's done. If that were the case, there'd be a lot of wet spots on jeans from the experience. She pressed close, with no space between us, moving so gracefully that it felt like we were alone, except for the very pleasant warmth of her body. I think I was in love with her before the first song ended. She was tall, around 5'9", and with her 5-inch heels, she could look me straight in the eye. Not model thin, but perfectly proportioned. Her chest was full, but not sagging, and her large green eyes were the most captivating I'd ever seen. Her honey blonde hair fell in loose curls down her back, stopping just above a behind that no skinny jeans could ever fully capture. When the dance ended, she refused to let go of my hand, pulling me over to her table. I met her friends, but to this day, I can't recall their names. The band wrapped up about 45 minutes before closing time, allowing us to talk without shouting. Her friends grew impatient and started urging her to leave. "Damn it, Mel, kiss the guy you know you want to, get his number, and let's go," one of her friends said, and she did. You never forget the first kiss from someone you're attracted to. Hers was soft, yet firm, no tongue, but full of promise. "Will you be here tomorrow?" she asked as she pulled away. I simply nodded. "Meet me out front at 7:30. Take me somewhere nice for dinner. Bye." And just like that, she was gone, leaving behind a trace of her perfume on me and the taste of her lips lingering. I went back to the bar where my friends gave me a hard time. "Nice way to play hard to get, bandit," Billy chuckled. "If she'd pulled out a hoop, I bet you'd have jumped right through it." I got the nickname because my real name is Jesse James. My dad chose it because he admired the outlaw's Robin Hood-like qualities. I looked him up once and found that many historians consider him the first recorded criminal sociopath in American history. I didn't care about the reasons or how it happened. I just cared that she chose me, but I was extremely cautious. You see, my track record with women hasn't been great. I'd been in 2 serious relationships since high school. The first ended when she made it clear she wasn't going to wait for me while I was in service. "I'm 19. You might not come back. I don't want that future of uncertainty. I care about you a lot, and if I'm still single when you return, maybe we can pick things up again." I hated it, but I understood. When I got back, we did reconnect, but we had both changed, and the magic was gone. We realized that pretty early on and parted on good terms. The second one I met in college. She was the star of the volleyball team, tall, muscular, attractive, and the most arrogant woman I'd ever met. Someone once told her she was special, and she believed it for life. The volleyball team won back-to-back national championships at a school where the basketball and football programs were mediocre. This made her the queen bee, and everyone, staff and students alike, catered to her every whim. Everyone in town knew who Cindy Tolliver was. I wasn't exactly a troll myself. At 6'1", thanks to my military training and job, I was as solid as the walls I built, with a decent six-pack, though I rarely took my shirt off except when working. My sandy brown hair had red highlights from being outdoors so much, and my blue eyes were so pale they were almost gray. Being outdoors a lot also gave me a perpetual tan. The beauty of drywall construction is that it can be done in any weather, because you don't have to worry about the mortar setting correctly. So we worked year-round, unless the ground was so frozen we couldn't set the stone properly. I took most of my classes in the winter. Cindy was so accustomed to always getting her way that she was taken aback when someone actually turned her down. That day, it was me who refused. We were at a popular off-campus bar and grill. The food was excellent, reasonably priced, and the place was packed during happy hour. I was seated alone at a large table since everything else was taken by the crowd. I was enjoying a delicious cheeseburger when Cindy and her group arrived, 2 women and 4 guys. Noticing that my table was the only empty one, she approached me. "My friends and I need a table, and yours is the only one available. Would you mind giving it up so we can sit?" She flashed a big, insincere smile, assuming I would gladly vacate the table for her convenience. "Yes," I replied with a smile, returning to my meal. She mistook my yes as a cue for me to leave, but I actually meant that I wasn't willing to move, so I continued eating. After a minute or 2, she huffed in frustration. "Are you going to leave or what? We're waiting. I'll vacate the table when I'm finished, or if a smaller one becomes available, or since there's plenty of space, you could all join me." "Why don't you just stand at the bar?" one of the guys said loudly, puffing up a bit. I grinned. "Don't you know that standing while eating makes your feet bigger? I already have trouble finding a decent size 14, so I don't need to make it worse." "Maybe I should make you leave," he snarled. He was about 5'10" and in decent shape, but his posture and attitude suggested he lacked any real skill. I glanced at him for a moment, took a big sip of my tea, ate a few fries, and sighed. "All right. Here are the 3 possible outcomes. 1. You beat me up, and everyone thinks you're a jerk for picking a fight with someone just minding his own business. Secondly, I'm going to hurt you in front of your friends, and everyone will agree that you deserve it because you're a first-class asshole. Or 3, you leave me alone while I finish my last 2 bites, and I'll be out of your way. Why don't you let your friends sit down while you go order drinks? I'll be gone by the time you return." He puffed up his chest. Cindy watched the scene unfold with amazement and raised her hand. "Stop it, Brian. This could end badly for you. Do what he said and order our drinks. We'll be right here if this gentleman is willing to share." At that point, I finished my meal. I stood up, pulled out a chair for the girl closest to me. "Please take the table. I'm done anyway. Enjoy your evening." I reached behind the column near the table to grab my cane. My foot was in a cast due to an overzealous apprentice who tried to impress me by dropping a 65-pound stone on it, breaking 2 bones. That's why I needed the table. I couldn't stand at the bar. Her eyes widened. "Please stay and let us buy you a beer." "Thanks for the offer, but I must decline. I can't drink right now as it would interfere with my medication." Brian returned, saw the cast, and smirked, clearly thinking I'd be an easy target. Sure enough, he followed me to my truck. "You think a cast will protect you? It just makes it easier. I'm going to—" I'd heard enough. Wincing from the sudden movement, I drove the point of my cane into the soft tissue above his groin. He collapsed immediately, making a sound like a balloon deflating, and ended up wetting himself. I turned back to my truck. "Don't get up until I'm out of the parking lot. If you do, I'll assume you intend to harm me and you won't like my response. Grow up, loser, before someone less patient than me gets hold of you." He was still lying there when I hit the street. Unbeknownst to me, Cindy and her friends had noticed Brian's absence and came out to help. They saw our little encounter, picked Brian up, dusted him off, and Cindy interrogated everyone in the restaurant for information about me. Cindy took it upon herself to find me. She had little success because I mostly attended night classes and didn't mingle with the college crowd. Being older and more mature from my time in service, I wasn't interested in the typical college experience. Eventually, she located me by hanging out at the bar and grill where I frequented. When I walked in, she stood up and pointed to an empty chair. "Great, you're here. I saved you a seat." She gestured to the only free chair at the table. I scanned the room, noticing other available seats, and was about to choose one when she placed a hand on my arm. "Please," she said, using a word she rarely employed. "Just for a moment, we owe you an apology. Brian was an idiot, which is why he's no longer part of our group." Her tone seemed sincere, so I took a seat. To my surprise, Cindy and her friends were not the stereotypical clueless jocks. One was majoring in political science and had a job offer from a lobbyist group lined up upon graduation. Another was pre-law and had already been accepted into Yale. And the third was planning to work for her father after earning her MBA from Wharton. Cindy was studying sports psychology, a field she intended to pursue after her career as a professional volleyball player ended. It was refreshing to see them fend off admirers while discussing the profitability of new sports in relation to their future careers, occasionally asking for my input. If I could answer their questions, I did. If not, I admitted it. I told them that I was too busy running my business to follow many sports, particularly the newer extreme ones. This led to inquiries about my occupation, especially from the business major. Wow, that's quite a niche market. Is it lucrative? What's your business plan? What percentage of the market do you control? I raised my hand to stop her. It's very lucrative. I might not get incredibly rich, but I'll be quite comfortable. My advertising is mainly through word of mouth, and my work isn't affordable for everyone. I mostly handle multi-million-dollar properties. At the moment, I have 2 major projects with developers and a restoration contract with the state college system. With my current crew, I'm booked nearly 2 years in advance. Tomorrow, I'm flying out to discuss a similar project with a college system in another state. This would add another 2 to 3 years of work. I'll likely interview and hire some local masons there to ensure the project starts on time. Even during economic downturns, I've maintained steady work because I cater to the wealthy. Everyone leaned back, surprised. Becca, the business major, was the first to speak. Wow, I'm working on a paper about the viability of niche businesses. I think I might abandon my current topic and focus entirely on your business, if that's okay with you. Please? I considered it for a moment and smiled. Sure, it'll serve as free advertising for the business. Just a heads up, much of the work is out of town, so you might need to travel for a thorough analysis. She smiled back. Not a problem. One of the perks of having wealthy parents is having access to funds, especially if I say it's for school. Cindy initially scowled at the idea of her trailing after me, but wisely chose to stay silent at that moment. I later found out she tried to dissuade Becca, but Becca wouldn't budge. It's a great opportunity, Sin. The report will significantly enhance my Wharton application, and I have no intention of getting involved with him. Becca smirked slightly before adding, what he might have in mind could be another story. Let's be honest. She was a stunning and determined woman used to getting her way. I was more laid back and non-confrontational, generally going with the flow unless it conflicted with my values. It was only a matter of time before we ended up together, beginning a rather intense 2-year relationship. I led her on a bit of a chase, realizing early on that the only way to keep things fair was to keep her off balance. If she got too comfortable, her my way or else's attitude would surface. I made it clear to her, you may be the queen at school, but to me, you're just another girl. Sure, you're beautiful and I'm attracted to you, but I won't be your subordinate. I see serious relationships as partnerships, with mutual give and take, where each partner has strengths and weaknesses. In a perfect relationship, these should balance each other out, with each partner taking the lead as needed. Understand? She gave me a smile that was half smirk. Oh, I understand. And I plan to be your queen by the end, just as you'll be my king. Those were the words I needed to hear, so for 18 months, I climbed the mountain, only to find there was nothing at the top but a sheer cliff. I think she would have been willing to engage in intimacy on our first date if I had insisted on it, but I decided to make her wait as part of my strategy to keep her insecure. We often moved on to more interesting things, but then I abruptly ended everything and she got very upset. In the end, she got tired of it. One evening when I brought her to the very edge and then stopped, she couldn't stand it. Damn it, you bandit. It's time to step up and give me what I want. What's the problem? Do you think I'm not good enough? I can provide some recommendations if you need them. Or are you afraid that you won't be able to do it? Don't worry. I'll be happy to train you the way I like. I could tell by the look on her face that she realized she had gone too far. She started to apologize, but I interrupted her. Don't worry about it, Sin. I've already heard from several of your acquaintances about your skills. I may not be as experienced as you, but I've never had any complaints. It's very kind of you to offer to share your experience. Just like in volleyball, the more you practice, the better you get. And we already know how skilled you are at it. I paused, realizing that I might have emphasized the word experienced too much. And no matter how generous your offer is, I think I'll decline. Good night. She begged and tried to stop me when I left her apartment. She was strong, but after many years of struggle, I easily broke free. I haven't seen her for 2 weeks, despite her persistent calls, texts, and emails. I had tight deadlines and had to work all weekend. Her last 2 letters were quite harsh. She wasn't used to rejection and didn't handle it well. Back in town, I bumped into Becca, the business major, and her pre-law friend Carol at the bar and grill. I was sitting alone when they suddenly joined me at my table. Carol had a wide grin on her face. "So, did Cindy really dump you?" she asked. Becca noticed my expression tighten and chuckled. "Look at his face, Carol. I bet he actually ended things with her. Isn't that right, Jess?" I maintained a neutral expression. "I'd say it was a mutual decision. Let's just say our views on relationships were too different." "Ha," she replied. "I'd guess it was more like her telling you to leave and you explaining you weren't interested. Whatever happened, it really shook her up. She's been a total nightmare since you left. Coach even threatened to bench her if she didn't get her act together. Well, speak of the devil." Cindy walked in with a basketball player. She saw us and immediately scowled. Ignoring the basketball player, she stormed over and he followed, trying to hold her hand. When she snapped at him again, he let go. "What part of just friends didn't you get?" The look on his face made it clear that wasn't what Cindy had meant. "What the hell, Sin? Why are you hanging around this guy? He's already dumped you once. He's a loser and couldn't give you the life you deserve like I could." Becca nearly fell off her chair laughing. "What was it Bugs Bunny used to say? Oh yeah, what a maroon. You're not even out of school yet, and your chances of going pro are slim. Depending on your major, it could be years before you earn decent money. Jesse, on the other hand, owns a very successful business and has been making 6 figures for years. Not bad for a redneck, huh, Dustin?" Dustin was about to retort angrily when Carol intervened. "Dustin, whatever you're thinking, stop. Look at him. He didn't get those muscles from the gym. He's also served 2 combat tours, so he knows how to hurt and kill people. He wouldn't hesitate to take you apart and put you back together a foot shorter. Maybe you'd like to sit at the bar while he and Cindy talk? Come on, Becca and I will keep you company." They led him away, grumbling. Cindy plopped down and stared at me for a few minutes before speaking. "The most frustrating thing about people indulging you is that it actually works. I admit, I can be arrogant and a total control freak. I hate being told no. But Jess, I'm a good person. I'm in college, for crying out loud. Surely you believe I can grow and learn. Can we have a fresh start?" I paused, reflecting. She was one of those who couldn't handle silence, so she started again. "I'm sorry for what happened the other night. Honestly, I've never gone without intimacy for this long since starting college. I've been conditioned to think of myself as a special prize, deserving of constant admiration. I realize I'm just a girl, a pretty girl, but there are many who are prettier, fitter, smarter, and more understanding. Becca and Carol, for example. They've been upfront about their interest if we're truly done. But they'll never love you like I do, Jess. They'll never respond to you the way I do when you touch them. If you need time, I'll wait. You set the pace, and I'll follow." 90 minutes later, we broke her bed. We wrote it down, laughing the whole way. I kept touching her because she was nearly there again. Eventually, we collapsed together, the bed sagging beneath us. "I'm sorry, baby," I said, stroking her. She had no fat on her at all. "I'll buy us a new one tomorrow. A new set, if you like. Think the store would let us test it out first?" She moved above me, her long hair falling into my face. Her expression was hard to read. Us? A suite? I pushed her hair back so she could see my face and know I was serious. Yes, babe. United States. You know I stay with my grandmother when I'm home. I mostly live in an RV, so it doesn't make sense to spend money on an apartment or house. What I'm trying to say, in a really awkward way, is that I'd like us to live together. She cried, but I could tell there was a yes in there somewhere. We got up, took apart the broken bed, and slept on the mattress that night. It seemed she preferred traditional furniture, picking a huge oak four-poster bed and even insisting we bounce on it a few times while the saleswoman blushed and smiled. 4 months later, she wanted to see where things were going. They didn't win nationals that year. She blamed me, saying I distracted her from extra practice and kept her too drained. She was about to graduate and had a very tempting offer to join a seasoned professional on the beach volleyball circuit. The pay was decent, but she explained that most of the money came from endorsements, personal appearances, and television. She wanted to do it for 3 years to save enough for her education up to the PhD level. After several long discussions, we decided the best option was to get married. She actually fainted when I proposed and gave her the ring. We decided to wait until after her first year on the circuit to marry. I hoped that by then she'd have had enough and quit to focus on her studies. I could cover her tuition. She came from a single-parent household, and her father couldn't afford to help her. We spent a wonderful month together. She traveled with me from job site to job site, exploring the cities while I worked, and then focusing on keeping me exhausted every night. For the first time in my life, I struggled to lift the heavier rocks. My crew laughed and told me if I eased up on the after-hours exercise, I'd regain my strength. That's why I pay you guys, to do the heavy lifting. I'm not giving up my exercise routine. Now get those rocks over here. It was really tough when she left. She clung to me and cried like a baby. I practically had to force her off me so she could catch her flight. It was hard because I didn't want her to go. If you're unhappy, sweetheart, come home. I've got the money for your schooling, so you don't need to worry about that. She sighed and held me even tighter. Throughout my life, people have taken care of me. My dad, then school, and now you. I need to prove that I can manage on my own just once. Plus, I signed a contract. I have to complete this season. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I understood. The first year was tough for both of us. She did exceptionally well, and she and her partner were the first runners-up in the point standings. As they won more, their earnings increased. I watched her on TV, but I wasn't a fan of the almost thong outfits they wore. It's in the contract, darling. The manufacturer has offered us an advertising campaign due to our popularity. It's a good deal. You don't mind, do you? How could I not support her? It took time away from us, but we managed. We ended up seeing each other only about once a month for 3 days. I was counting down the days until the end of the season. When she came home, we tried to make up for lost time. Mom kept hinting about grandchildren, and it turned out my sister and I had something in common. We both liked girls. That's why she spent so much time with us. She was hoping to connect with some of Cindy's friends. 2 of her teammates were gay, and another was openly bisexual. Beck had a brief fling, but ended it because neither was ready to settle down. Eventually, she found a nice, quiet girl, and they got married. After getting over Becky's choice, Mom started hinting to her about adoption or IVF. They were considering it. After 4 wonderful weeks, her mood changed. I tolerated it as long as I could before I confronted her. What's going on, Sin? Don't try to brush me off. We're going to stay right here until you tell me. She hesitated for a while before admitting, I signed a contract for another season. They've doubled our salary, and the exposure is worth a lot more. I'm really sorry, but I have to do this for myself. Please don't be upset." I wasn't just upset, I was livid. We argued for most of the time before she left. "Why can't you be more supportive? Just this year, I swear." "I am supportive. All of last year, remember? You made promises then, didn't you? I guess your word isn't worth much when money's involved." That was the wrong thing to say. She erupted into a screaming fit. I listened only halfway, and after about 10 minutes, she noticed I wasn't hanging on her every word. She stopped abruptly and tried again in a quieter tone. "I guess I deserve that. Here's what I'll do. I'll write up a contract. If I don't stop next year, the marriage is over. Please, Bandit. This really means a lot to me." I simply stared at her. "A contract isn't needed. If you don't stop next year, I'm leaving. Do you understand?" She turned pale and made a flurry of promises. Promises she didn't keep. They had an even better start to the following year. Her partner, Jan, called to thank me for allowing her to play. "This is my final year on the tour, so unless she finds a new partner, her career is over as well. I'm planning to teach and have already secured a position as a high school math teacher and volleyball coach in a small town in California. I've always loved the beach. Perhaps I'll meet a nice quiet guy and get married again. Then again, if we had an arrangement like yours, maybe I'd still be married." I wasn't aware she was divorced. I only knew she was married and that her husband disapproved of her being away. When Cindy mentioned it, I gave her a knowing look. She understood and fell silent. What agreement, Jan? The way I asked made her hesitate. "Oh, the understanding you have." I let the silence linger and her anxiety grew. "Sorry, I wasn't being clear. I didn't mean just any understanding, but your specific understanding. She's really fortunate to have you. I have to go now. Look out for us on TV." The entire conversation left me feeling a bit unsettled. The first time she came home, I brought it up with her. "Don't worry about it, honey. She's been a bit scattered since her divorce. I think it affected her more than she's willing to admit. Trust me, I won't make her mistakes. I love you too much." When I asked her what mistakes she was talking about, she was somewhat vague. I pressed her, and she eventually confessed she'd had an affair with one of the men on the tour, which her husband discovered. "I promise, honey, I'll never hurt you like that. I have too much to lose." The intimacy over those 3 days was intense. When I asked her about it, she said she was trying to make up for lost time. On her next break, she could only stay with me for 2 days because she had a shoot for a swimwear company. Apparently, they also had a sportswear brand and worked with various sports figures. The photos were well done, but the swimwear made me uncomfortable. This time, it was a thong, and she and John were paired with 2 up-and-coming golfers, Steve and a young Spanish player named Juan Pablo. The men wore tight Speedos, and some shots showed the girls entwined with the golfers in thongs and topless. I wasn't happy, even though there was no actual nudity. She usually called every Monday and Tuesday, but I didn't hear from her, despite leaving 6 voicemails and emails. The following week, I didn't answer her calls, even though she tried 10 times. When she came home the next week, unscheduled, she was furious. After she got mad at me for not responding, I told her I was just following her example. We were both very upset, and it all ended abruptly when I advised her to send her Spanish boyfriend to hell. She turned so pale that I thought she might faint. At that moment, I had had enough, so I got up and left. 2 days later, she found me at a construction site and begged me on her knees to give her a chance to talk. She spent 2 days insisting that nothing was happening, and if I was as unhappy as I was, she would never do another commercial. She swore on anything that she would leave forever after the end of the season. Looking back, I realized that everything was according to the script, but her words were correct, and I believed her. She did 2 more photo shoots, both times with a golfer, once in casual clothes and the other in more modest swimsuits. and in none of the photos did they physically touch. Things went awry when I needed a set of tires for my truck, and I went to the dealer in the city where I worked. It took over an hour, so I crossed the street to have lunch. After lunch, I had to wait another 10 minutes for the tire, so I leafed through some magazines. One of them caught my attention, a golf magazine from 2 weeks ago. There was an article about Juan Pablo which depicted him on and off the field. The photo in which he sat in the stands, watching a game of beach volleyball, and then kissed one of the winners stood out. The article quoted him as saying that he attended all the events that his schedule allowed in order to support his girlfriend. As you may have guessed, the player was Cindy. I was furious. I deliberately ignored her calls and flew to her next match. He and Jen always lived in the same room, so I arrived around 7. Jen opened the door and turned pale when she saw me. Cindy wasn't there. I called her while Jen was there. Cindy seemed genuinely pleased to receive my call. "Hello, dear. Where have you been? I was already starting to worry that you might have found a replacement for me." "I could never replace you, honey. Am I interrupting dinner?" I heard some noise in the background. "Yes, it's you." Jen and I are sitting in the dining room of the hotel. The food is actually quite delicious. I managed to chat with her for a few minutes, while Jen looked increasingly scared. I hung up the phone and turned to Jan with a smile. "Jan, did I ever mention that I served in the army? I spent 2 years in the desert, taking lives at every opportunity. I'm not going to hurt you, Jan, but if I don't get the truth out of you right now, then I'm going to have to do it. You will survive, but you will never be able to walk normally and use your hands as before. No one needs a crippled volleyball player or a coach. I'm definitely going to jail, but not before I deal with Cindy and her Latin lover. It's up to you, but if you want to avoid the difficult path, now is the time to start a conversation." Would I go through with it? Probably not, but at that moment I was really angry. Jen must have believed that I was serious, given the horror on her face. She was talking so fast that I had to ask her to slow down. It all started at the end of the first season, but not with him, with another volleyball player. According to her, it was not about love, but just a way to relieve tension. She admitted that she did the same thing until her husband found out about it. Despite her pleas, the damage was done, and he divorced her. Cindy had an affair with Juan during the first photo shoot. It seemed that the physical intimacy was too strong to resist. "She told me you didn't mind, Jess. She said that you both had an agreement where she could meet her needs, and you did the same when you went to work. She also mentioned that it would all end when the season was over, and often talked about how glad she was for your marriage." She lowered her head, realizing that there had never been such an agreement. "Where is she now?" Her eyes widened in fear. "Please, Jess, let me call her and bring her here so you can talk. I'm sure you can work it out. Tell me right now, or you'll at least have serious problems." I stood up, and she recoiled in horror. "They're at his hotel on the other side of town. He came to the tournament." She gave me the room number, mentioning that they could go dancing. I grabbed her and pinned her against the wall. "If you warn her, I'll come back and get even angrier. Do we understand each other?" At the end, she nodded so fast that I was afraid she might get hurt. I went out into the lobby and saw them walking hand in hand towards the elevators. I had the room number and I could have waited, but knowing what they were up to, waiting for them to get down to business was pointless. I gave them 3 minutes before kicking down the door. They were kissing. When she looked back, saw me, and almost fainted, he was drunk enough to try to act tough. I quickly subdued him by turning him around and twisting his arm behind his back. "Stand still, asshole. Try to resist and I'll make it worse. Is that clear? Good. Now tell me how long you've been sleeping with her, and if you lie, I'll find out. 3, maybe 4 months. It's okay, dude. Calm down. So you slept with her for so long, knowing she was engaged, and you thought it was okay? I read that you are engaged, too, and she is waiting for you to return to Spain. Do you think she won't see anything special in this? Let's call her and see. At that moment, he was begging. Cindy put the bed between us and straightened her dress. She still didn't say a word. Realizing that I didn't have much time and that people in the audience might hear, I let him go. He stood up and I hit him hard. Let's see how he tries to swing the baton now. He collapsed to the floor and I turned to Cindy. Keep the ring. I don't care about that anymore. Come back when you have the courage and I'll pack your things. Don't bother talking. We have nothing more to say to each other. I went out, took the elevator down, and approached the receptionist. I apologized, saying that I was clumsy and accidentally crashed into the door of room 418, mentioning that my girlfriend and I were going to visit him, and he was outside the door and could have been hurt. I gave him a credit card number, offering to pay for repairs and any medical bills. He wanted me to stay, but I said I had to catch a plane, and I left him my phone number through my girlfriend if necessary. I found out about it the following day while watching a bit of the tournament he was participating in. The commentators made a big fuss about his injury, suggesting it could sideline him for the rest of the season, and they described it as a mere accident among friends. Rumors quickly spread throughout the sports community, and he used the injury as an excuse to fly home. The next season, the commentators speculated about his new single status. I hadn't told anyone, but many of the other golfers and announcers were staying at the same hotel, so it was impossible to keep it under wraps. Jan and Cindy performed poorly in their next 3 matches, losing in straight sets each time. By the end of the season, Jan retired, but Cindy teamed up with a new partner who had just graduated from college. She played for 4 more seasons before quitting to earn her PhD. She made several attempts over about 3 months to get me to speak with her, even telling my mother that she was coming to town and would meet with me whether I liked it or not. Mom found it amusing and challenged her to try. She never showed up. So there it is. It may not be very original. This kind of thing probably happens countless times a day all over the world. But for me, it was my world that fell apart. For 2 years, I harbored a deep mistrust towards women. Then I met Melody, and everything started to brighten up again. As I mentioned, she worked as a trauma nurse at the local hospital. She had 12-hour shifts on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, and was on call every other week. It felt like fate, since her work schedule often aligned with mine. I was usually away for at least 4 days at a time, so our time off generally coincided. We took things slow at first, a few dinners, dancing at nicer places than the bar where we first met. We watched some romantic comedies, visited a museum, went to a baseball game. She was open to just about anything, and honestly, all she had to do was flash those stunning eyes of hers, and I was eager to do whatever it took to make her happy. We never saw each other on the days when she was working, but she always called me when she had a break. She lived with 2 other nurses, and they had a rule about not bringing their boyfriends home. One of us is always working, and the other is usually sleeping, so we don't let you guys in so you don't get distracted. Besides, last year, before we introduced these rules, one of us had a boyfriend stolen while the other was sleeping. I had to replace them both. So, no guys, baby. Rules are rules. We engaged in intimacy, and it was incredible. We spent nearly all the time I was back from work until she had to leave for her job together. Renting motel rooms grew tiresome, so I started asking around. Given my network, I reached out for help finding a house with at least 3 bedrooms on a large lot, and I got quite a bit of teasing. So someone finally caught you, huh? Good for you. That was a frequent response. I'd just smile and show them a photo, and then the comments were usually something like, "Lucky bastard." One interior designer gave me a hard time. You fool. Don't you know that, 99% of the time, the woman chooses the house? You might want to keep her involved. I took her advice and, armed with insider information about homes in distress or owners looking to sell due to the economy or divorce, I started house hunting. I used the excuse of wanting to spend more time with her and needing a woman's perspective, so I took her along. She wasn't impressed with the first 5 houses, but the second weekend, we found a 4-bedroom home on 3 acres on the outskirts of town. She toured the house, admiring the appliances and particularly liking the spacious kitchen. She loved the layout, which placed the master bedroom on one side of the house, away from the other bedrooms for added privacy. We explored the entire 3 acres, discovered a small spring, and she even touched some of the larger trees. What are you thinking about? Mel looked at me with misty eyes and said, "Tree houses." I took a day off the following week to start the paperwork. I had scored an excellent deal. The property was in foreclosure and the owners were eager to avoid the process. They had left that week, disappearing without a trace. On Friday, we returned to the house for another visit. I asked her if she thought she could be happy living there. "I'm sure I'd love it." "Why do you ask?" "Because we bought it on Monday. I need you to choose new furniture. Is that okay with you?" Before she could respond, I dropped to one knee. "I hope you like this house because I plan to live here for a long time. I want to share that time with you. I'd love to eventually use 1 or 2 of the extra bedrooms. All you need to do is say yes." I presented the ring, a classic simple design with a sizable diamond. To my surprise, she leaned against the kitchen counter, overwhelmed. Melody quickly composed herself, tears in her eyes. Her response wasn't what I had hoped for. "I love you, Jesse, but I can't marry you right now. I'm asking for some time to sort out a few things before I can accept your proposal. Please, and I'm really begging here, give me 6 months and ask again. I promise it will be worth the wait." I was deeply disappointed by her answer, which was not what I expected. Despite my disheartenment, she did her best to comfort me, even taking me shopping the next day for furniture. She had no specific preferences as long as it was durable. We purchased a master bedroom set with a California king bed, a sectional sofa, a love seat, and a rocking chair for the living room. I watched her sit in the rocker with a smile on her face. "This might be nice to have a year or 2 down the road," she said, simply, which gave me hope. I handed her a credit card and told her to buy whatever she thought we needed. I introduced Melody to my family. Mom and Becky took an immediate liking to her. Grandma was less enthusiastic, but my younger brother was practically drooling over her, and my stepdad just grinned. I took it as a positive sign. I arrived the following Friday and headed straight to the new house. She had set up a lovely dining room suite and prepared a guest room. Her car was parked outside, but I didn't see her. I found her on a California double bed. She moved closer to me and held out her hand. "I was just about to start without you. I want to inaugurate every piece of furniture and every inch of space in our new home. Next weekend, we'll tackle the yard." I tried my best, but all we managed that weekend were the bedroom and the dining room table. She laughed and said she'd take pity on me, and we'd work on the guest room and the living room next week. The following weekend, I was at the bar waiting for her, feeling happier than ever before, when a guy came in and hit me. When she vanished, I had a few more drinks with my friends before heading to my new house to wait for the love of my life. As I was heading out to my car, 2 gunshots rang out. They struck the car 2 spaces away from mine, but they were close enough to scare me badly. My instincts kicked in, and I dropped and rolled behind an SUV. I could hear the guy approaching, crying and cursing as he searched between the cars. I crawled under the SUV, then popped up and ran in a crouch to the next row of vehicles. Come out, you bastard! I'll make sure you never mess with another husband. The voice roared with anger, and I could tell he was pretty drunk from the slurred speech. When he passed under a parking lot light, I saw it was the same guy who had hit me, confirming that this was not a random attack. He was targeting me. My stepdad used to say, "Never leave a live snake behind you," so I hunkered down and waited. As the guy got close to my hiding spot, searching the other row, I carefully tossed the shoe I had taken off behind him. The slight noise made him spin around, and as soon as his back was turned, I sprang into action. I grabbed his hand, which had a gun in it, and pulled it back with force. The pressure made him let go of me, and after that, I started throwing punches. He never managed to land a single blow on me. Realizing that I was on the verge of doing something terrible if I continued, I let him go and stood up. He was unconscious, so I picked him up, threw him into the back of the truck, and drove on. Eventually, I stopped in front of an abandoned barn in the middle of nowhere. He started to come to his senses when I lowered the tailgate and pulled him out by his legs, causing his head to hit the gravel as he fell, and he lost consciousness again. He came to his senses when I splashed water in his face from the cooler in the back of the truck. When he came to his senses, his eyes widened in horror when he saw that he was tied up. My intention was to scare him. I raised the gun. A .32 caliber? Seriously? The only thing a weapon like this is good for is to annoy people, and it definitely did that to me. Now I'm going to talk, and you're going to listen and nod. When I'm done, you can speak out, and it's better to make it sound convincing, because right now, I have a strong desire to play with this gun. Now, you have a chance to talk. I had to give him credit. Even beaten, bound, and helpless, he still stared at me intently. What do you think I should have said? That I don't mind if you sleep with my wife? No way. Sooner or later you won't be around, and I'll get my revenge. It's better if you just bury me now. I looked down at him. He should have been scared, but he didn't back down. It made me kind of admire him. I grabbed him, sat him on the back door of my car, and, holding his shirt, methodically spanked him. Clap. I'm not going to clap, sleeping with no one's wife. Clap! What do I need to do to get you to leave me alone? This situation is no longer funny. In my back pocket, he breathed. Take out my wallet. Tell me it's not Melody in the picture. If that's not the case, I'll apologize. And you can do whatever you want with me. I can't describe the feeling that came over me when he said her name. Denial raged in my head as I took out my wallet, already knowing what I would find. There she was, younger, a little thinner, smiling at the camera in a wedding dress with her husband. Sighing, I sat down next to him. He really seemed pleased. Is that her, asshole? Don't pay attention. I can see by your face that it is. You really didn't know, did you? How does it feel? I hope this is as sad for you as it is for me. We had a conversation, and after 15 minutes, I let him leave, retrieved the bottle of straight rye whiskey I had picked up for the bar at my new place, and we proceeded to get drunk. I woke up when the sunlight hit my face and saw him sitting there with the .32, staring at me. A jolt of fear shot through me as he grinned. He then placed the pistol in the toolbox. You're right. It's not much of a weapon, but I wouldn't want to get shot with one. So, we talked again, this time sitting on the tailgate of the truck. I apologized once more, surprised when he brushed it off. I always knew it was coming. Sooner or later, the age difference and our lack of common interests would catch up. Plus, I'm away every weekend. She had plenty of time to fool around. That explained her free time. He was a long-haul trucker, specializing in hazardous loads that were best transported over weekends and nights to avoid heavy traffic. It paid well, but kept him away from home from Thursday night until Sunday night. What are you going to do? He looked at me in surprise. I'm divorcing her, for sure. She's yours now if you still want her. I had drunkenly confessed my marriage proposal to him. I shrugged. How can I trust her? This is the second time something like this has happened to me. No, we're done. It hurts, but I know from experience that it's something I can get over. I drove him back to his car and reminded him to take his pistol as he got out. Keep it. I don't need it around, reminding me of what could have happened. As he was getting into his vehicle, I asked him again what his plans were. You're lucky. You can just walk away. I have to deal with a divorce. I'm going to try to keep it straightforward. No fault. Just go your separate ways and leave me alone. No kids involved, so it shouldn't get complicated. If it does, let me know. If you claim adultery, I can testify for you. That might help. He looked up in surprise and slowly extended his hand. I reached out from the truck window and shook it. Sorry, man, he said as he started the engine and drove off. I watched his taillights fade away. Me too, I said to the empty space before heading in the opposite direction. I went to Graham's house, got into the RV, and drove away. I wasn't trying to avoid anyone, but I knew it was best to wait a bit before speaking with her. While I'm not one to resort to physical violence, I'm not above using sharp words. I stopped at a rest area and sent her an email. Melody, I'm not running away, but right now is not the best time for you to be around me. Please don't look for me. I'm out of town until next weekend and will be using this time to reflect on our relationship. You do remember it, don't you? The one built on lies? Call me next weekend, and if I can manage my anger, I'll try to listen to what you have to say. Don't expect me to believe much of it, though. She responded promptly with a brief message. Thank you for at least agreeing to hear me out. There's a lot you don't know about me that I'd like to share. Unless you tell me otherwise, I'll come by your house next Saturday at 4. And Jess, whether you believe it or not, I do love you. I spent the week in contemplation and reflection. My friends were aware of some of the situation, so they forgave me for being insufferable in the early days. As Saturday approached, my sense of foreboding grew. At least she hadn't dressed up or tried to seduce me. She wore jeans and a simple top, yet she was still the most attractive woman I'd ever seen. Despite the makeup, I was relieved to see her eyes were red from crying. I didn't let her go beyond the kitchen, making her sit across from me at the table. She'd spent 2 weeks deciding was just right. She began to speak, but I raised my hand. Ground rules. Don't tell me how much you love me, and don't waste time with endless apologies. Just explain to me, why were you out at bars, hooking up with guys while you were married? Do you think I can move forward, constantly wondering where you are when I'm away working? You could crawl out of bed with someone else, shower, and then greet me fresh-faced, dragging me to bed for sloppy seconds. Could you live with that uncertainty if the roles were reversed? She cried softly for a few minutes, pulling herself together before speaking again. The look of defeat on her face was absolute. I've already lost you, haven't I? I didn't respond, so she straightened up, met my gaze, and began her story. I don't think it matters anymore, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I grew up dirt poor. The term trailer park trash sums up my childhood. My mom left when I was too young to remember her, so I was raised by my dad and 2 older sisters. I was an accidental baby, born when my parents were in their late 30s. My sisters were teenagers by then. My dad was a functional alcoholic, and in all the years he was alive, he never once told me he loved me. She sighed, lost in thought. He died of liver disease right after I turned 18. By then, both my sisters had families, one on her second marriage, the other on her third. So, as you can see, I didn't exactly have good role models. Then I met Jerry. I didn't love him, but I respected him and trusted he would take care of me. I believed that love would eventually grow between us. Everything was going well until he took that job. I was feeling bored and lonely. He convinced me to enroll in a nursing program at the community college to give me something to focus on. I don't think he ever thought I would graduate, let alone continue my studies and become a registered nurse. But for the first time in my life, I had a purpose and a valuable skill. The ER job offered the highest salary, so I took it. It was intense and demanding, which kept me from thinking too much about my life. Jerry was earning good money, so I saved most of my salary, planning to use it for a down payment on a house. Everything was fine until my hours changed. Now, when he was home, I wasn't. I made new friends who encouraged me to stop sitting at home and join them for drinks, maybe some dancing. I still wore my rings and never let anyone touch me, but it helped ease the boredom. I know it doesn't matter anymore, but I was already planning to leave Jerry before I met you. Then I fell in love and desire, and I couldn't resist being with you. The first time you kissed me, I knew it was the end for me and Jerry. I still respected him, but I was never going to love him. So I got a lawyer and started the divorce process. I wasn't in a rush, though. I wanted to get to know you better. I had no intention of jumping into a new relationship until I was absolutely sure. I don't expect you to believe me, but I never slept with anyone else until you. You're only the second man I've ever been with, and that's the honest truth. She pulled out some documents. Look at the date. These should have been filed months ago. I just didn't know how to break it to him, and the guilt was eating me alive. That's why I wanted to wait, sweetheart. I may not be perfect, sleeping with you and loving you while I was still married, but I couldn't accept your ring until I was officially free. I was planning to tell you soon. I just wanted to wait until after I had moved out, and honestly, I was going to bend the truth a little about the timeline. She stopped talking, waiting for my response. You know, I actually believe most of what you're telling me, Mel, but there are still a few things that don't sit right with me. First, when you realized how you felt, you should have separated right then. Instead, you stayed with Jerry, probably as a backup plan in case I wasn't what you wanted, and you must have been sleeping with him, even while you were with me. How do you justify that to yourself? Or to me? But what really bothers me is that even if we end up together, I'll still have to travel for work. What happens when you get lonely? Will you go out with friends and maybe fall into the same situation again? Am I going to end up like Jerry, lurking in parking lots, ready to confront your next lover? Her tears grew as I spoke. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. It all comes down to trust, Mel. If I marry someone, it will be to a woman I trust completely. Someone who will always have our best interests at heart. Right now, you're not that person. Honestly, I doubt you ever will be. But here's what I'll offer. Get your divorce, take some time, and then, if you're still interested, give me a call. Maybe we can start over. We'll see. That was the final word. It took her 10 minutes to calm down. She wanted a kiss, but I refused. I did give her a hug, though, and she held on so tight I figured I'd have bruises later. She pulled back, sniffling. I understand, Jess. I really do. And even though you don't care much for my promises right now, I'm still going to make one. It doesn't matter if we get back together. You will never, ever find a woman who loves you more than I do. And someday, maybe years down the line, even if we're not together, I'll find a way to prove it to you. With that, she turned and left without another word. We only spoke a couple of times after that. I was too angry, and she was too emotional for us to have any meaningful conversations, but she was determined to try. Eventually, she stopped trying to talk directly and started emailing me about once a week. She tried to keep things light and casual, but for about 3 months, every email ended with her asking for another chance. I only replied occasionally when something she said struck a chord. She told me about starting therapy and how much it was helping her. She even convinced Jerry to go with her twice, though all she said about it was that it was insightful. Her emails became less frequent, maybe twice a month, and after 7 months, she stopped altogether. I still have her last email saved. I can't seem to bring myself to delete it. My dearest Jess, I know it bothers you when I use terms of affection, but this will be my final message to you, so I'm going to say what I feel, even if you don't like it. I got the papers today. I'm officially single again. The second best thing to ever happen to me, I'll always consider meeting you the first, was starting therapy. It helped me discover who I really am. I never should have married Jerry, but I was selfish, trying to escape my miserable life. I was too young, too immature, and too stubborn to handle an adult relationship. Sure, I went through the motions, but my heart was never in it. Even if you hadn't come along, my marriage would have fallen apart eventually. I think fear and inertia kept me with him. My sessions with Dr. Chu helped me let go of my crutches and stand on my own 2 feet for the first time. Jerry was surprised when I told him I didn't want any of our shared assets, and I even sent him a check to repay him for my education. I owed him that much, at least. We didn't part as friends, but I don't think he hates me as much anymore. It's kind of funny if you think about it. Remember when I lied about living with 2 nurses and the no boyfriends rule? Well, that's my reality now. I'm sharing a 3-bedroom condo with 2 nurses. It works for me, though I'm more independent now. I'm not sure I could handle coming home to an empty apartment. As a gift to mark my divorce, I'm going to let you go. Dr. Chu helped me see that if I were you, I'd find it hard to trust me too. So I'm letting go. I hope you have a good life and find a woman who loves you as much as I did and as much as I still do. Mel. I stared at the screen for a long time, my finger hovering over the delete button. I didn't want to read it again. It hurt too much. But in the end, I saved it. I drifted through life without much direction. If it weren't for my job, I might have completely lost myself. It took nearly 10 months before I went on a date. She was the sister of a contractor I worked with frequently, beautiful, sharp, and quite fond of pressing herself against me while we danced. I thoroughly enjoyed the evening, but by the end, we both realized there was no real chemistry. We went on 2 more dates before she met someone else, and we mutually agreed to move on. During that time, I saw Mel twice. The first time was while I was stopped at a traffic light. I spotted her through the window of a small cafe, surrounded by women smiling and chatting. I stared so long that the driver behind me had to honk to get me moving. As I pulled away, Mel looked up, locking eyes with me when she heard the noise. The second time was at a club. I was on my second date with Tina, and as we were getting seated, I noticed Mel across the room with 4 friends. She must have felt my gaze because she looked up and saw me. For what felt like forever, but was probably only 30 seconds, we just stared at each other. Then she suddenly burst into tears and ran out of the club with her friends chasing after her, all except one who came over to my table. Asshole! Did it feel good rubbing another woman in her face? What the hell is wrong with you? I stayed pretty calm. Hello to you too, Gwen. I don't want to dismiss your perspective, but I'm not flaunting anyone in front of anyone. It's been almost a year since Mel and I split. This is a small town. We were bound to cross paths eventually. Tell her I'm sorry if it upset her, but she needs to move on. Good night, Gwen. I turned back to Tina, ignoring Gwen. She stood there glaring for a while before walking off, muttering asshole under her breath. Naturally, Tina wanted to know the full story, so I told her. She looked at me and sighed. You can say it's over all you want, but I saw your face when you saw her. Even now, you're keeping an eye on the door, hoping she'll come back. And Mel's still in love with you. Why else would an ex cry after almost a year apart? You two need to talk. I didn't respond to her comment. We went on one more date before she met someone else who caught her interest. Jerry started hanging around my cousin's bar. It worked for both of us, as it was the one place Mel would never set foot in again. He turned out to be a decent guy. As we got closer, the guys would tease him about trying to kill me. I told them to cut it out. He had every reason. If he hadn't been so drunk, he probably would have been a lot more accurate, and I'd just be a memory. One night, after having quite a few beers, he suddenly asked me, "Do you miss her?" I knew exactly who he meant. There was no point in lying. Every day. He sighed. Yeah, me too, but not every day. Just sometimes, when I see a mutual friend or pass by a place we used to go to. I spent a lot of years with her. You know, I ran into one of her nurse friends the other day, one of the few I actually liked. We chatted for a bit, and she told me they call Melody the nun because she refuses to date anyone. She didn't blame me, though. She blamed you, said you messed her up so badly that she can't even imagine being close to another man. She also told me Melody's been in therapy, but I'm sure you already knew that. Apparently, one of her therapy tasks was to write apology letters to everyone she had wronged. In mine, she called it purging the demons. Did you get one too? I admitted that I had, but didn't go into detail. Well, as much as she screwed me over, I still remember the good times, and toward the end, she owned up to her mistakes. Heck, she even paid me back for her nursing degree. I hope she finds someone nice. I just grunted. Jerry got lucky, though. The day his divorce was finalized, one of the dispatchers at his job asked him out. She was a few years older, a war widow with a 14-year-old boy and a 12-year-old girl. They were a perfect match, same views, same beliefs, and he got along great with her kids. He even became an assistant coach on her daughter's softball team. He nagged me and my cousin into sponsoring the team, and we even brought half the bar to a few games, cheering her on by name and embarrassing her in the process. But the hug she gave him was real, and he looked so proud he could burst. We were already planning his bachelor party. I was happy for him, but it made me feel sad for myself, watching those little girls play and wondering if I'd ever get the chance to sit in the stands and cheer for my own kid. Time wasn't on my side. I was already 32, and the clock was ticking, so I threw myself deeper into my work, expanding the business. But eventually, you reach a point where the market gets saturated. I was taking on more jobs than we could handle, even after hiring more masons. My grandma and sister started getting on my case about it. Let someone else take those contracts, Jess. Catch up on what you've already got. If you don't, the quality's going to slip. And that's the kiss of death in this line of work. Think of Pop. Do you want his legacy to disappear? They were right. I stopped taking on more work, and even passed a few smaller projects to competitors I trusted to do a good job. I managed to get my business back on track, but personally, I felt a bit lost. I reconnected with Becca, an old friend from college, when she contacted me to bid on a job. She had emailed me using her married name, so I didn't recognize her at first. When we met, I noticed she'd put on a little weight, but was still very attractive. Becca had become very successful in her career, and by her own account, she had married well. Her husband was quite wealthy, 7 figures wealthy, according to Becca. She made a point of mentioning this while holding his arm, much to his embarrassment. He seemed about 10 years older than her, and they had just welcomed their first child. The project they wanted was quite elaborate. It included a small stone cottage, which was meant to be a playhouse. Becca envisioned it like a Scottish shepherd's cottage she had seen on their honeymoon. We discussed the details, and I agreed to take on the job as long as I could work on my own schedule. I brought 2 apprentices and a journeyman on board, and began with the boundary and privacy walls. I started with the groundwork, laying out the design and selecting stones. Becca wanted local fieldstone, which was a challenge since there weren't any local suppliers. Fortunately, I found some by purchasing existing walls from an estate. I carefully labeled each stone so I could rebuild it exactly at the new location. There was also a stone chimney on the property, the last remnant of the original house. I wandered over to inspect the chimney and saw an impressive example of stonework. Each stone, down to the flagstone hearth, was perfectly shaped and fitted. It inspired me so much that I asked Becca to come take a look, and when I shared my idea, she loved it immediately. I ended up building her a stone patio, using the fireplace as the centerpiece. It had half walls tapering into a V shape to reflect heat into the seating area, making it ideal for cool fall evenings. Years later, she sent me a photo of her 3 kids and their friends sitting around the fire, roasting marshmallows, with snow falling all around them. There was an unexpected surprise when I dismantled the original fireplace. Beneath the largest hearthstone, I discovered a hidden compartment. Back in the day, it was common to store valuables this way, as fire was a bigger risk than theft. Inside was a wooden cigar box containing a half-full bottle of whiskey, still good because it had been stored cork-side down, 2 love letters from the 1870s, and a wedding ring. There was also a small bag with 2 silver dollars and some other loose change. The letters were from the man's lover for whom he had bought the ring, but he had tragically died in a fire before they could marry. Technically, the contents were mine since I had bought the estate, but I turned everything over to the heirs. They quarreled over it for a while before donating it to the local historical society. It even made the papers, sparking a wave of people digging up hearths across the county. If anyone found anything, though, they didn't say. After I wrapped up the project, Becca invited me to a party to showcase my work. I attended, mainly for business reasons. After all, most of her friends were quite well off. I made a few connections and eventually found myself sitting with Becca as the party wound down. "I still talk to her every now and then," she suddenly said. I knew she was referring to Cindy. I hadn't thought about her in years. Without asking, she showed me some photos on her phone. Cindy had cut her hair much shorter than back in college, and she'd probably gained around 30 pounds. On her tall frame, it didn't look too bad, but the athletic tone I remembered was gone. One picture showed her standing with a man who was a few inches shorter, their arms wrapped around each other, smiling for the camera. "That's her second husband," Becca explained. "The first marriage was a disaster. They both had affairs. A year after the divorce, she met David when he brought her a client. They went for coffee, which turned into a date, and eventually led to marriage. She was in therapy and told him everything about you, her first husband, and how she didn't think she was cut out to be a good wife. But after a long engagement, he convinced her to take the plunge, to trust him, because he couldn't imagine life without her. They eloped the next day. It's been almost 2 years now, and they're inseparable. I think she'll make it work this time." I think I caught her off guard when I told her I was genuinely happy for Cindy. After thinking it over, I realized I truly was happy for her. It had apparently taken her years to sort herself out, and I hoped the wait had been worth it. As for me, I stopped dating, trying to figure things out for myself. I couldn't imagine getting involved with anyone while the memory of Melody still lingered. On impulse, I sent her an email. "Mel, I just wanted to let you know that I wasn't trying to make any kind of statement when I saw you at the club. I had no intention of causing you any pain or discomfort. It was purely accidental. I had no idea you'd be there. If it makes you feel any better, it pretty much ruined my night too." Jess's. She replied the next day. I'm sorry for ruining your evening. I had no right to do that. I know we're over, and I know we'll never be together again. I just can't seem to stop loving you, and I've given up trying. Time is supposed to heal, but all it does is make me miss you more. I've been offered a job at another hospital, far enough away that I won't bump into you. I think I'll take it and start fresh. Maybe then I'll finally heal. I truly wish you happiness. Mel. P.S. If you ever want to talk, just email. I thought about it. I didn't really see her that often, but if moving away would help her, I was all for it. Maybe then at least one of us would be happy. And there we were, swaying to the music. It felt strangely familiar, yet completely different. Jerry had paid off the band, and they played 3 slow songs in a row. I would have stopped after the first one, but she wouldn't let go. I considered insisting, but I didn't. When the songs finally ended, she tightened her grip on my hand. Will you sit with me for a while? Please? I'll get on my knees and beg if I have to. The thought of her actually doing that and embarrassing both of us made me agree. She led me to a small table in the back, far enough from the band so we could talk. She tried to make small talk, and I let her go on for a minute before cutting in. What do you really want to say, Mel? Stop skirting around the issue and just say it. She lowered her head briefly, then looked up with a look of determination I'd never seen before. I can sum it up in one word: you. I want you back. I've tried, Jess, I've really tried. But I can't let you go, can't forget you, can't stop loving you. I see it in your eyes. You still care about me. I know you're not dating. My friends make a point of telling me that whenever they see me. Why? You've got everything. Good looks, strong values, a great job, a bright future. I bet you've been approached plenty since we split, but you turned them all down. I think I know why. And I can tell you why I haven't found anyone else. First of all, I didn't want anyone else. I've thought about dating a few times, but every time I compare them to you and say no. I never stopped loving you. I didn't even try to pretend. Can we please start over? I think you'll find I've changed a lot. I'm asking for just one chance. One date. And if it doesn't feel right, I'll never bother you again. Think about it, and call me. My number hasn't changed. Thanks for listening, and thank you for the dance. It meant a lot to me. She jumped up, kissed me on the cheek, and then walked away. I saw her talk to Jerry and Anna, hugging them both before vanishing through the door. Jerry came over and took a seat. So, what do you think? What do you mean? Stop playing dumb. Are you going to give her another chance? You should. You deserve it. I stared at him as if he'd turned green and started speaking a foreign language. He just sighed. It's your decision. One more thing I meant to mention earlier. From the moment she met you, she never slept with me again. She apologized in her letter saying she'd been exposed to something at work and needed 6 months before it would be safe to have intimacy again, and that she would need to be tested to ensure she was disease-free. I should have been upset, but by the time she told me, I was already over her. I think deep down, I never really loved her. Not the way she deserved. Anyway, congratulate us one more time before we head out. Niagara Falls. Can you believe it? I wanted somewhere warm, but she chose this. I have a feeling that whatever Anna wants, Anna gets. She wanted me, and she got me. She was the one who insisted I get you both here. She can be very persuasive. I like it. I mulled it over for about 2 weeks. The neighboring town hosted Friday night concerts on the old courthouse lawn during the summer, featuring blues, folk, the occasional rock and country band to mix things up. That weekend, there was a blues duo named Freeman Feelbad Jr. and Sweet Thang, which I had seen before and thought were quite good. I gave Mel a call to see if she'd like to join me. After a lengthy silence, I thought she might have hung up, But then I heard a soft, yes, followed by what sounded like a sob, and the call ended. It seemed like a safe bet. With plenty of people around, there was little risk of things becoming too intense. I didn't pick her up. We met at the venue instead. I arrived early, secured a good spot, and set up the chairs ahead of time. She showed up right on schedule at our meeting place. At first, she didn't notice me, so I took a moment to watch her. She was wearing a pale yellow sundress, and her long curls shone against the setting sun, breathtakingly beautiful. When she finally saw me, her smile lit up. She almost hugged me, but caught herself, and instead, shyly brushed my hand. We spent the time before the show, strolling around the square, window shopping and people watching. I got us 2 glasses of red wine that I knew she liked to enjoy while we listened. The duo was impressive, delivering a professional performance. The man was at least in his mid-40s, while the woman appeared to be in her early 30s. Their voices blended seamlessly, and he was a master of slide guitar. Their banter between songs was funny, and their song selection had something for everyone. We chuckled at the funny ones, but when the guy sang about a cheating woman, the sorrow in his voice was palpable. Mel tensed up and glanced at me, her cheeks reddening. The next song, a duet about rekindling romance, made her smile. By 9, the concert had ended. She stood as I packed up the chairs, gazing at me with a touch of longing. Thank you for tonight, Jess. It isn't over yet, unless you want it to be. I'm hungry. How about grabbing a pizza at Yanni's? She took my hand, her eyes welling up with tears. It was one of our favorite spots when we were together. Yanni's, located on the square, served both Greek and Italian dishes. They stayed open an extra hour on concert nights and always had a good crowd. I had done the stonework for his outdoor dining area. Yanni himself served us, not even waiting for us to order. Ah, young lovers, have you forgotten your old friend? It's good to see you again. One Yanni pizza coming right up. We enjoyed a large pizza, half topped with anchovies, my choice, and the other half loaded with mushrooms, hers. After eating, we had the leftovers boxed up, and I walked her to her car. Thanks for the evening, Mel. I had a great time. She had been holding my hand since we left the restaurant. Before I could say more, she pulled me into a tight hug, kissed me on the cheek, and jumped into her car. I stood there watching her taillights disappear, wondering what it all meant. We went on a couple more dates. First, to a cheesy romance movie where she used the opportunity to hold my hand and cuddle while she sniffled, and then to a local fair. She made me walk with her through all the exhibits, marveling at the canned goods and cakes, and laughing at the unusual vegetables. When we reached a large quilt display, featuring dozens of quilts ranging from traditional to modern, she stopped in her tracks. Tears welled up in her eyes, and a memory hit me. I recalled her showing me a picture of a quilt in one of her magazines during one of our cozy nights at my new house. She had said, "I've always wanted to learn how to make that." "Why's that?" I asked. "Because, silly, I want to create a personal quilt for each of our children. Something durable they can pass down to their own children, and eventually to our great-grandchildren." She realized what she had said and looked at me nervously. I grinned and asked, "How many quilts are we talking about?" She smiled, relieved I wasn't upset. "Oh, at least 3. Maybe more if I'm lucky." She laughed at my surprised expression and settled back down, flipping through the magazine. Back in the present, I didn't say anything, but gently squeezed her hand and grabbed a card from in front of the display, slipping it into my pocket. Busy Needle Quilting Club. Join us and learn the art of quilt making. We offer classes, workshops, and soon you'll be sewing with confidence. With her birthday coming up, I thought it would be the perfect gift. Candy would be eaten, flowers would wilt, but a new skill would last a lifetime. We enjoyed the rides together. or at least the ones she could convince me to go on. I watched as she tackled the scarier ones alone, finding it amusing that a battle-hardened veteran was scared of a roller coaster. She had her own fears, particularly thunderstorms. When she was 6, she had a near miss with lightning, which struck just 10 feet away and knocked her and her friends unconscious. Now, during storms, she stays well away from windows and shakes until it's over. Holding her close helped a bit. We shared our first full kiss while sitting together on the bleachers of the arena, watching the nightly fireworks at the fair. It happened spontaneously, without any planning. She said something, and when I turned to respond, our lips met, seemingly on their own. It felt like it lasted for hours, though it was probably only 10 or 15 seconds. When we pulled away, we looked at each other with astonishment. We didn't speak another word the rest of the evening, and when I dropped her off, she simply got out of the car and went inside. We didn't see each other for nearly 3 weeks. It wasn't that we were avoiding each other. I was just trying to catch up on work. The weather had delayed us, and it took that long to get back on track. We did talk on the phone a few times, but she seemed distant. I began to wonder if the kiss had been a mistake. I called home to let my family know I had finished the project and planned to return by Thursday. They seemed relieved and expressed concern that I was working too hard and burning out. I sighed and dropped the bag of dirty laundry in the hallway. I'll deal with it later, but right now all I wanted to do was take a shower, and I needed it badly. The only change I've made since I bought the apartment was the bathroom renovation. Now it was spacious, with a shower that could comfortably accommodate 4 people. It had 6 nozzles that could be used simultaneously, individually, or in any combination, offering options such as full flow, pulse massage, or light spraying. When everything was ready, my first thought was how much Mel would like it. The project was completed only 2 weeks after our breakup, which I was somewhat relieved about. I didn't want to remember Happy Mel every time I took a shower. After living alone for a while, you worry less about how you look when moving around the house. I got out of the shower, drying my hair with a towel. They had grown long and needed a haircut. When we met, I had short haircuts, and Mel convinced me to grow them out. She liked to run her hands over it. I thought I heard a giggle, and I pulled off the towel. Mel was sitting on the bed. "What? How? Why are you here?" She smiled broadly. "Your mom told me that you will be home today. The thing is, you never asked for your keys back. And the thing is, I have to tell you something. Now get dressed and meet me in the living room." She giggled again, glancing at me. She staggered out of the bedroom, felt me watching her, and looked over her shoulder with a grin. "Here's another idea. Stay in this position, and I'll join you." The thought made me fully alert. "No," I stammered. "I'll be out in a moment." I quickly grabbed some shorts and a shirt, trying to calm myself down. It took a few minutes. When I came out, she was sitting in the rocking chair, gazing out at the backyard. She turned to me with that beautiful smile. "I need to tell you some things, and I need you to listen without interrupting. I want to get everything out before I lose my nerve. Please?" I nodded and settled onto the sectional she insisted we keep. I had considered replacing it when we separated, but it fit well in the room and was comfortable. I usually preferred the recliner, but sitting on the sectional brought back memories of us cuddling or making love, making me move again. I know I've seemed off during our recent conversations. It's because of the kiss. It made me remember things I'd lost and want them back. I want you back. I want you to chase me around the house like you used to until I tire of the game and let you catch me. I want to take the air mattress into the backyard like we used to, lie on it, watch the stars while we cuddle, and then make love. I want you to love me again. She paused to collect her thoughts. I started to speak, but she raised her hand. "Wait, I'm almost finished." Then I realized something. You already love me. I know it, you know it, and everyone we know knows it. Love isn't our issue. Trust is. I lied to you in the worst possible way. It took me some time, but I now understand how deeply I hurt you. So, I had to figure out a way to regain your trust. Here's my proposal. Let me move back in. You have security cameras, so add more. Wire the whole house. Then, while you're away, you can check the feed anytime to see what I'm doing. Install a GPS tracker on my car so you can see where I am and where I've been. I've done some research, and we can get a personal tracker, like those worn by criminals. This model is a bracelet allowing you to see my location at all times. She looked down, her face flushed deeply. If that's not enough, I'll wear a chastity belt. They actually make them, I checked. You could lock me in when you leave and let me out when you come back. I'd do it all just to prove you can trust me. Wow. Mel had clearly given this a lot of thought. Unfortunately, there was one thing she hadn't considered. I tried to explain it to her as gently as possible. First, thank you for thinking of a way to fix things between us and for being willing to do everything you mentioned. But it won't work. Tears began to form, and I raised my hand to stop her from speaking. My turn. Please listen. All the things you're prepared to do are unnecessary. If we did them, you wouldn't be a partner in the relationship. You'd be a servant. While some of it might seem intriguing from a play perspective, you couldn't endure it constantly. Oh, I'm sure you'd try, but eventually you'd start to resent it. I know I would. These actions won't build trust. They'll do the opposite. If I have to go to that much effort, it would only reinforce the idea that you can't be trusted. I couldn't live like that. Deep down, you know this. Tears were streaming freely now. She stood up, stumbling toward the door. I stopped her, gently pulling her back to the couch. She buried her head in my shoulder and cried for a few minutes. I comforted her, cherishing the way she felt in my arms. Eventually, she pulled away. So, is it over then? Quite the opposite, darling. I think we're just starting. What you did today, and what you were willing to do, took a lot of courage. That's what makes me believe we might actually make it. So let's take it slow and build on what we've started, okay? She looked up and smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through after a storm. Really? Yes, sweetheart, really. This led to making love. After a pleasant time, she kissed me hard, snuggled up against my shoulder, and fell asleep. I stayed there, stroking her, until I dozed off, too. 2 hours later, I woke up to the smell of something that reminded me of how hungry I was. She was in the kitchen, with her hair still wet, wearing one of my t-shirts and nothing else. Obviously, she got up late enough to take a shower. When she noticed me, she smiled broadly, came up to me, and kissed me. When she pulled away, she gave me a mischievous smile. "I'd love to take a shower, baby. I can't wait to do it," she said, and her eyes darkened as she seemed to wonder if anyone had used it before her. It sounds like a fantastic idea. The only company I had there was my right hand, and I bet it would have been much nicer with you. Her smile widened and she kissed me hard. Then she turned everything off and headed to the bathroom. "Are you coming?" she asked with a smile. It was very cool, right in the shower. The next morning, I gave her a hard time. After the shower, I put on shorts and a t-shirt and slipped into the bedroom. I gently tickled her nose until she woke up, kissed her, and told her to clean up. I planned to invite her to have breakfast and then go to her house to get clothes. She worked 2 shifts at a friend's request and then came back to me for the weekend. I finally got to know her roommates and understood why she decided to move out. Amanda was a tall blonde. She looked decent, but she was nothing compared to Melody. She was married twice and divorced twice, and both times the reason was infidelity. Her last affair was with a woman, and she was a little in love with Mel. Beth was a stocky, red-haired girl who could be attractive if she smiled just once. She didn't cheat on her husband, but she had serious anger issues. In fact, he postponed their wedding until she asked for help, but she tricked him by claiming to have attended an anger management program. After they got married, she turned into what her ex described as a screeching siren that the devil probably kicked out of hell because even he couldn't stand her. He decided to file for divorce because of irreconcilable differences, because it was the easiest option, and in this case it was really the right one. She was genuinely shocked, despite his persistent requests for help right up to the day he submitted the documents. She didn't handle it well, and ended up with a restraining order that forbade her from being 500 feet away from him. She broke it twice before the judge got tired of it and sentenced her to jail for the weekend. She begged for counseling, which was given to her, but after 3 sessions of her screams, the counselor recommended that she consent to a divorce. It was a tragic situation, and he promised to stop the divorce if she asked for help. Naturally, she didn't do it. In retaliation, she slept with everyone she could and told him about it. By that time, he was already indifferent, because he had already met someone else. Ironically, she is currently undergoing treatment because the hospital has given her an ultimatum: get treatment, or you will be out of work. No one needs a nurse with the skill she has. As soon as Mel closed the door, they attacked me like predatory hyenas. So, you ruined it. I know your type of people, unable or unwilling to forgive. Your precious pride won't allow it. You're going to make her jump through hoops until you get tired and leave her again. What a jerk. I was stunned. My jaw dropped. I've never seen anyone express such anger. It must have been a relief for her to throw it out. I made a mental note never to turn away from Beth. Amanda was no better off. If you hurt her, I swear it will be the last thing you do. She deserves the best, someone who can truly love her, not some jerk who will blame her for the rest of her life because she made a mistake. She could have said more, but I've heard enough. My good mood has completely evaporated. Listen up, ladies. First of all, Mel and I are not touching you. And if you think you'll end up staying with her, think again. Mel is trying to be tolerant. I turned to Beth. I can kind of understand Amanda. She's in love, or at least has a strong desire. But there's no excuse for you. You just don't want anyone to be happy, plain and simple. Your husband deserves to be canonized for putting up with your nonsense for so long. I was on a roll. In retrospect, I may have been talking too loudly, but it was nice to take it all out, especially on people I didn't care about. So forget about both of you. I'm not interested in your problems, at all. Now, we need to sort out our own past. Don't wait for an invitation if we decide to get married. In fact, feel free to come. To see your faces when I say my vows would be just wonderful. Mel caught the end of our conversation and looked stunned. Amanda noticed this and immediately glared at her. I hope you've been listening to me, Mel. This guy is not going to bring you back. He's just playing with you, waiting for you to calm down before he throws the trigger. I've met guys like him before. Notice how often he repeats, if. My second husband was just like him, too proud to forgive a mistake. I was absolutely furious at that point. It's true, Amanda, it really is. Pride may stop you from doing certain things, but it also allows you to face yourself in the mirror each morning, knowing you're true to your beliefs. Pride lets you walk down the street and hold your head high for the same reason. I've often thought the old saying about pride was misguided. Pride doesn't precede a fall, it comes after it. When you're down in the dirt, and everything you wanted, believed in, and loved has been stripped away from you, pride will lift you up. Pride will compel you to live by your principles. It might not let you sleep at night, but it makes your insomnia manageable. Now, as stimulating as this conversation has been, Mel is ready, and we're leaving. I took her hand and pulled her out the door, feeling more relieved than ever to leave that place. Mel was silent on the drive back to her car. When we arrived home, she put her case in the trunk instead of bringing it inside. I was puzzled. Mel, sweetheart, let's bring your case into the house. There's no need to leave it in the car where it might get stolen. It'll be safe here until you return tonight. She avoided my gaze. I think I'll pass. I'll be really tired, so I might just go home and crash. I need some time to think without any distractions. It hit me hard. What happened, Mel? Just 3 hours ago, you were complaining about volunteering and trying to find someone to cover for you. Now, because of the rants of some seriously disturbed women, even after everything yesterday and this morning, you don't want to spend time with me? Fine. Go figure things out for yourself, but be careful. I've already learned to live without you once. If you pull any more passive-aggressive stunts, it will be the final straw. And before you leave, I'd like my key back. I think she realized then that she had made a serious mistake and tried to fix it. But I was way past being reasonable. After everything, if she wanted to withdraw now, she was done. I was done with her. I'd managed just fine without her. Of course I wasn't. I missed her even more than I had before our first breakup, feeling angry with myself for allowing myself to believe otherwise. I found solace in my work. Handling large stones required focus, something my broken toes had taught me. So, I threw myself into catching up on my backlog before the cold weather slowed us down. I didn't go home for 3 weeks and only took 1 day off, then to do some laundry and check on my house. I was somewhat surprised to see her car in my driveway. I was even more shocked when Mel burst out of the house and tackled me, knocking us both to the ground. She clung to me with a fierce grip, mumbling and babbling almost incoherently. She was quite strong, but she didn't lift rocks for a living. Tired of being gentle, I took her hands and forced them behind her back. "Shut up!" I had never raised my voice to her like that before, and it startled her into silence. I used the moment to get up, leaving her on the ground. I left her there, lying on the floor and whimpering like a wounded animal, determined not to help her. I almost closed the door when her cries turned into screams. Despite wanting nothing to do with her, I couldn't ignore her pain. I went back, tried to lift her up, but she resisted, so I picked her up and carried her towards the door. Her arms wrapped around my neck, tears streaming as she snuffled into it. I dropped her on the couch, not very gently, and went to fetch some water. "Drink," I ordered, propping her up. She drank, staring at me with wide eyes. "How did you get in here?" I asked once she had calmed down. She began to speak, but her words were disjointed and rambling. I held up my hand and she immediately fell silent. "I'm going to ask you one more time. Answer me simply. Speak slowly and honestly. If you lie, I won't speak to you again. Start." She looked down as she spoke, so quietly that I almost asked her to speak louder. I broke a window and immediately replaced it. I knew where you kept the spare keys, so I used them. That night, after finishing my shift, I went home and had a terrible argument with Amanda and Beth. They ended up kicking me out. I could have gone to a motel, but instead, I came here like a wounded animal, devastated by my own actions. I just wanted to be close to you and plead for your help in getting your love back. You weren't here, and you didn't respond to any of the messages, texts, or emails I sent. I felt safe here, so I stayed, waiting for you to return. If you want me to leave, just let me know. She looked utterly broken. Asking her to leave would have felt like kicking a puppy. Well, not right now. I still need to work through some things, and I'll need your help. Order a pizza, I'm starving. I'll be back after I shower. Her eyes brightened with hope, though my expression seemed to temper it a bit. When I came out, freshly showered and in sweats, I noticed she had freshened up with minimal makeup and her hair neatly tied back in a ponytail, making her look younger. I was spared from further conversation by the arrival of the pizza, which Mel quickly took to the kitchen. By the time I finished paying, she had plated the pizza and set a glass of wine beside it. I returned the wine. Water will be fine for now. I want to keep a clear head for later. She nodded, pouring us both a glass of water and leaving the wine untouched. I noticed how she ate, nibbling at the edges of her pizza and occasionally glancing up at me. She seemed a bit slimmer than I remembered. Are you on a diet? She shook her head. I just haven't been hungry lately. I nodded and continued eating, lost in thought. I really wasn't sure what to do. We were a pretty messed up pair of people. After we finished, she tidied up a bit, and we sat in the living room to talk. I could see she was disappointed that I didn't sit next to her and instead chose to face her from the recliner. Be honest with me, Mel. I know you want us back together, and I do too. But how? How can I ever trust you again? What could you possibly say or do to restore what we had before everything fell apart? Do you have any ideas? Actually, she did have a plan. Couples counseling. Pam, from work, told me about it. She went through a rough patch with her boyfriend just before their wedding, and they decided to go to counseling to see if they could save their relationship. She said it worked wonders. It made them realize they weren't ready for marriage. They postponed their wedding for a year, but it was worth it because when she finally walked down the aisle, they both knew with certainty that they were on the right path. I even get a discount through my job. Will you consider it? I think it might be the only way to move past what I've done. I'm willing to try, and I'm begging you. There's a chance we might realize we can't be together, but I'm willing to take that chance. Living this way is tearing me apart. Please promise you'll think about it. I could see that making this plea was hard for her, and I promised I would consider it. She nodded, looking somewhat hopeful. She then got up and started rummaging in the bedroom. A few minutes later, she came out pulling a suitcase behind her. Will you help me load this into my car? Well, what the hell? She stays at my place, pleads with me to go to counseling, and then just leaves. Where are you going? Mel looked surprised. To a motel, I guess. I know you don't want me here right now. I'll start looking for an apartment next week. I picked up the suitcase, surprised by how heavy it was. Instead of heading to the door, I carried it back to the bedroom, tossed it on the bed, and began unpacking it. She followed me, watching silently before asking in a quiet voice what I was doing. I'm putting your clothes back where they belong. Want to help me? I can do it myself, but I might not put things where you want them. I held up one of her thongs, twirling it playfully. She blushed and quickly grabbed it from me. I'll make a deal, she said through tears. I'll put them away and wear them, but you have to take them off as much as you can. I'd never seen a woman cry and smile at the same time. Her face shifted through so many emotions. Deal, I replied softly, kissing her cheek. But there will be some rules. I think I'll have that wine now. Want your glass? She nodded, her hair falling over her eyes. 10 minutes later, she curled up beside me, sipping her wine. For a while, she said nothing, just enjoying the moment. Then, in a voice so quiet I barely heard it, she whispered, Rules? Yes, Mel, rules. I want to say we'll make it, but until we work through our problems, I'm not sure. You're going to stay here with me. You can sleep in my bed if you want. We won't improve if we're apart. Schedule the counseling sessions as soon as possible. Email me the dates, but please try to make them Friday evenings so I can manage work. I'm willing to try, Mel. You know I love you more than anything, but I need to be sure I can trust you completely. And, if either of us feels it's not working, we'll be honest with each other right away. Agreed? I thought she'd jump at the chance, but she stayed quiet, sipping her wine. Just as I was about to say more, she spoke. Yes, with all my heart, and I'll be sleeping in our bed. Where else would I sleep? I want a few things from you too. I need you to ease up on work enough to actually spend more than just a day with me here and there. And I want your absolute promise that you'll attend all the counseling sessions unless there's a real emergency. Promise me. I was about to answer when she held up her hand. One more thing. I want you to come up with a way I can prove how much I love you and that I'll always be faithful. Whatever it is, I'll do it. But I have my own insecurities too, so I may ask you for the same in the future. Deal? Deal, I said. We didn't make love that night. It just didn't feel right somehow. It wasn't that I didn't desire her, especially when I saw what she was wearing to bed. It wasn't some seductive teddy gown or exotic lingerie. Just a really thin red tank top and matching bikini panties. It looked incredibly intimacy. She curled up next to me as I stroked her body, and she fell asleep within minutes. I stayed awake, thinking and wondering if we were finally on the right track toward happiness. I stuck to my word, working half days or not at all on Fridays so I could be home for our counseling sessions. The counselor turned out to be a man, which surprised me. I would have bet she'd pick a woman. It turns out she chose him because he had the highest success rate in helping couples work through their issues. I liked him. He was calm, laid back, and said he preferred to keep the drama low. We each had an individual session before doing one together. During these, he asked what we hoped to achieve from the counseling. Our answers were pretty similar. He was calm, but didn't sugarcoat things, and often Mel would end up in tears before a session was over. I didn't cry, but he pushed my buttons skillfully enough to make me want to hit him a few times. He got Mel to admit what I had long suspected. She stayed with Jerry, especially in the early stages of our relationship, as a backup plan in case I wasn't who I appeared to be. When she realized she wanted me, she started the divorce process, but didn't follow through with filing. Her reason? She wasn't sure of my feelings until I proposed. I called it out, and the counselor actually agreed with me. Is that really true, Melanie? During the 6 months you dated, especially once you started spending weekends together, didn't you feel secure in his love? Even if you did refuse intimacy with your ex while dating Jesse, you still shared a bed, cuddled, and exchanged sweet words. And when your ex left, you did the same with Jesse. Yes, you eventually divorced, but only after getting caught. Her response came in a near scream, catching both of us off guard. You think I don't know what I did? I betrayed them both. I destroyed any chance of happiness I could ever have. She calmed down a little, sniffling. I don't necessarily believe that, Melanie, or else you both wouldn't be here now. However, I do think we've reached the limit of what these sessions can accomplish. We both stared at him, surprised. But we're not healed yet, Melanie exclaimed. No, you're not, but you've come as far as you can with my help. It's clear you two are still deeply in love. That much is obvious. You both want to stay together and achieve the happiness you desperately crave. That's evident. But it all boils down to trust. Can Jesse trust you? Hopefully. Does he now? Number. And the same goes for you. In your mind, you're unsure if he'll ever fully forgive you, or if he might seek revenge at some point. You both have to decide soon if the work and pain you'll endure to heal these wounds are worth it. I can't make that decision for you, nor can I magically fix everything. All I can do is wish you the best and tell you this. If you can find forgiveness for one another, you won't regret it. But if you can't, you'll need to cut your losses and move on. I wish you all the luck in the world. We ended up outside his office, staring at each other in disbelief. Melanie summed it up perfectly. What do we do now? I had no response. We tried to move forward for 3 months. We had moments of happiness, but then something would trigger one of us, and things would be tense for a day or so. Frustration started building, and cracks were beginning to show. While I was away for work, I thought of her often. She called me every night, which I looked forward to, and would send me pictures of herself at home, trying to reassure me. But that got old fast. One night, I told her, "Enough! Stop sending me pictures, and stop locking yourself in the house every night. It's driving both of us insane. Go out sometimes, have dinner with friends, or even grab a drink with your coworkers. I'm going to trust that you're an adult who made a mistake and learned from it. If I don't, then what's the point?" I think she understood. A few days later, she went to see a movie with her best friend. She loved horror films, which I wasn't into, and the next night, she called me, saying how much fun she'd had, before her tone got serious. "Thank you, honey, for the love and the trust. I ... She got choked up and stopped. I felt good about it and joked that I was glad I didn't have to be dragged to another terrible movie. Her playful side came out again. "They're not terrible. They're an art form, something a caveman like you just doesn't get. Despite your limited intellect, I still love you. Good night, honey." Even though I was trying, I think she sensed something was holding me back. She had been quiet the last week or so, and I knew it might be the beginning of the end. Oddly enough, everything came to a head at, of all places, a flea market. Mel loved the scent of incense and had little burners all over the house. I tolerated it because most of the smells were pleasant enough. At the market, there was a booth run by a woman who looked like a knockoff voodoo queen, and it had hundreds of scents. Mel was running low and asked me to take her. We both enjoyed going there, often spending hours just browsing. We didn't actually buy much, but every now and then, we'd come across a treasure, at least what we thought was one. I watched her move gracefully back and forth, the very picture of elegance, smiling as she occasionally brought a small item to her nose. She felt my gaze and looked up, giving me that familiar smile of joy I adored. But then her eyes clouded, and she looked down, sadness filling her expression. At that moment, I realized that unless I changed soon, I was going to lose her. It was late summer, and as we were leaving, one of those brief seasonal storms rolled in, all wind and lightning, passing as quickly as it arrived. The first clap of thunder startled Mel, making her jump a little. I instinctively wrapped my arm around her, comforting her. Thankfully, we were indoors, in one of the endless halls. We'd arrived late, and the vendors were beginning to pack up. "Wait here, honey. I'll go get the truck and pull up to the door." I sprinted into the parking lot and was drenched almost immediately. As I waited in line to pull up, my mind raced, almost praying for a way to break through my emotional block and love her the way I knew I should. As I pulled up, a song I had always liked came on the oldies station. Slow dancing, swaying to the music. Slow dancing, just me and my girl. I looked toward the entrance, searching for Mel, and noticed a bumper sticker on a van nearby, likely the incense seller's. There were several stickers, but one stood out, sending a shiver down my spine. Life isn't about hiding from the storm, it's about learning to love dancing in the rain. That was it. I finally had a way to show myself, without a doubt, that Mel truly loved me. I opened the truck door and turned the volume up. Standing in the pouring rain, with lightning flashing around me, I extended my hand. "I've figured it out, honey. If you really love me, truly, deeply love me, you'll come outside and dance with me. This is our last chance. Please, please, let's dance." I was practically shouting to be heard. Everyone was watching her, curious about what she would do next. I knew she couldn't see them through the rain, but tears were streaming down my face. She slowly approached the door, trembling with each flash of lightning, while I stood only a few feet away, reaching out my hand to her. Mel looked deep into my eyes, trying to figure out if I was being genuine. She must have found the answer she needed because, with one quick step, she was in my arms, holding on tightly, trembling at each thunderclap, but moving with me, kissing me. The song ended about a minute and a half later, and I lifted her into the truck. It was a brief moment, but it said everything we needed to express. She loved me enough to confront her greatest fear to show it. What could have been a clearer proof? We sat in the parking lot, drying each other off with napkins from the dashboard, laughing and crying together. Then we went home and made love. And what we shared was pure, absolute love. 9 months later, I felt dizzy just looking at it. The newest, tallest, and most terrifying roller coaster in the world. It had loops, twists, and a 325-foot vertical drop. But I had to go through with it, so I gripped her hand tightly as we stood, ready to be strapped in. A week after our slow dance in the rain, she had told me that one day she would ask for something in return, something to prove my absolute love for her. I had agreed without hesitation, and now, here we were. The coaster looked like a bullet with single-file seating. She let me go first, holding my hand as they strapped me in and locked the harness. Then, fear washed over me as she let go and stepped back. "Aren't you coming with me?" For some reason, she was smiling and crying at the same time. "I can't." "What do you mean you can't?" I almost shouted as the ride jolted forward, picking up speed. "Rule number 3! I glanced at the rules as we sped past them. Rule 1. Riders must be at least 48 inches tall. Rule 2. People with heart conditions or other medical issues should not ride. Rule 3. No pregnant women allowed. Wait, what?